In the last 1 year, top penalties imposed on financial institutions for anti-money laundering and compliance violations. In this session, we will talk about the recent cases in the year 2021 and 2022 in which the financial institutions were penalized. We will discuss the names of the institutions, how much penalty were imposed, and what were the problems, what were the reasons which led to imposition of those penalties. So all the cases we will try to discuss in this session. Now by all the cases, I mean that the main cases and all the cases that I was able to compile together. Money laundering and these penalties, money laundering actually takes place on a regular basis, and there are much more penalties that we will talk about in this session have been imposed. But we will try to cover up the main ones which have been most recently imposed on many banks and financial institutions. So let us, before talking about all those penalties, let us just try to understand why is it important to know. Firstly, this session is all about the anti-money laundering session in which I've started a few weeks back, in which I have spoken about the careers in money laundering, about the PEPs, about many other things in order to educate you about the concept of money laundering. If you wish to seek a career in this field, which is a non-litigation career, which includes in-office work and working with financial institutions. So if in case you're looking for a career in this field, all these videos could help you understand the concept of money laundering, which will also help you in order to appear for job interviews and answer certain questions which an employer would expect you to know. So from your point of view, it is important for you to know, so especially for those of you who are just starting their career or are in the career or do have an experience of 0 to 2 years. And of course, for all those who are doing their graduation right now, it is important for you to understand the names, what exactly happened, why that happened, and what measures should banks take in order to avoid it does not happen in future. So that is actually the reason for you to understand that. And in terms of the financial institutions, why they need to study these things is because, of course, that criminal activities upgrade with every year. With time, the activities of the criminals actually reach new levels. So it is important for banks to see what has happened and take restrictive measures in order to prevent those activities in future. So that is the reason banks need to study these case laws, and they should know that what exactly has happened. So that is the reason why banks should study these cases. Now, for those of you who are coming from a litigation point of view, we usually won't be discussing the citations. We all know that while we discuss the case laws, it is important for us to discuss the citations. For example, this versus this, AIR, so and so. So in these cases, they are just penalties that have been imposed on financial institutions, and they must have a file number and so and all the details. But it is not important for us at this stage to exactly know those file numbers, because they will not be of much use. What you need to understand is the names of the bank, how much penalties was imposed, and what was the reasons for that. If you are able to understand all these things, it is more than enough for you. So in this video, I will talk about the recent cases in 2021 and 2022. And as time passes, it will be required for you to be updated with the recent penalties that have happened. So as of now, I have compiled all the major and the most important case laws. I have tried to brief them up, and I will try to first discuss that, and then you can have a look at the description as well, which will also have a summarization of all the cases. Right? So let us first start with a few Indian cases, which are just two as of now, which I have for you. The first one was the case of Bank of Maharashtra, where Bank of Maharashtra was penalized with 1.12 CR because it had not followed the guidelines imposed by RBI to verify the KYC. KYC, know your customer, हर बैंक को जो है वो चीज करनी पड़ती है. So Bank of Maharashtra was actually unable to follow a few KYC guidelines, and therefore it was penalized with 1.12 crores by the Reserve Bank of India. Another case was where Central Bank of India was imposed a penalty of about 25 lakhs on the Haryana state cooperative Apex Bank for contravention of the RBI guidelines, directions on housing and finance. तो they did not follow the RBI guidelines. Therefore, central bank imposed a penalty of 25 lakhs. So these are a too few Indian cases which you must know, and there are many. As time passes, as the days pass, there will be much more that cases that would be coming out. So 2 Indian cases, and now let us go and try to understand some other big cases that have happened just in the last 1 year. And the first one I would like to start with is the case which has the maximum penalty that has been imposed by any financial institution, as per my knowledge, as far as I know. So that will happen in this particular case, 888 UK Limited, where it was imposed 9.4 million, not rupees, pounds. So 9.4 million pounds was imposed on this financial institutions. It is basically an online gaming. It's an online platform that has about 78 websites that allows people to gamble. So the problem that the mistakes that this institution made was failure to implement the gambling commission guidelines. So जो guidelines थी, they failed to implement that, and they did not do due diligence of their customers, and they were not able to check the source of funds which the customers used for online gambling. So because of these 3 things, they were penalized with 9.4 million pounds, and this happens to be, as far as my knowledge, one of the biggest biggest penalty that has been imposed on any financial institution. Failure to comply with guidelines, they did not do due diligence, and they were unable to check the source of funds which the people used for gambling purposes. That's the first case. Second case is again a huge amount of fine that was imposed. This is actually imposed on an Azerbaijani politician. It's important to know what happened. So the name was Javanshir Feyziyev. You will have the name in the description. So 5.6 million was imposed because he had laundered a certain amount of money into the United Kingdom using and violating certain guidelines. So the family was imposed. This person comes under the category of a PEP. In case if you do not know what a PEP is, I've also made a video on that, which you will get in the description below. So do have a look at that. So it was basically suspicious funds brought into UK through complex money laundering scheme. That actually happened in this situation, and he was fined with 5.6 million pounds. The court ruled that funds, the accused actually had committed a criminal conduct, and the funds were actually brought into the country by using illegal means, and the court actually forfeited 5.6 million that belonged to this particular politician. So that is the second case. The third case, we will go further, which is where 2 million was imposed on the financial regulator of Netherlands, basically imposed a fine of 2 million on Robeco for failing to check the money laundering activities sufficiently. So because this institution was unable to check the money laundering activities in a sufficient way, so therefore it was imposed a fine of 2 million euros. Moving further, Ambank was fined with 70 crore US dollars. It's basically the bank had to pay that to the Malaysian government for its part in the 1MDB scandal. So 1MDB scandal में उसकी involvement के लिए the bank had to pay this amount. It's a very brief summarization. इस involvement में उसको, because it was believed that it did not fail to check. Exactly what happened was that the Saudi royal family paid $681 million to former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak in one account. So Razak was convicted for money laundering and corruption related to 1MDB conspiracy. So therefore, for the involvement of the bank, they were penalized with this particular amount. Moving further, Capital One, where the bank was penalized because it deliberately and carelessly did not follow the Bank Secrecy Act. I will try to make a specific video on what the Bank Secrecy Act is, but in the United States, the banks are supposed to follow the guidelines of the Bank Secrecy Act, which is one of the major acts which banks have to follow. So they did not follow the guidelines of this act, and therefore from 2008 to 2014, millions of dollars in suspicious transactions were unreported, and they were basically traded. So because of this thing, Capital One was fined with 100,000 US dollars. Deutsche Bank. Similar thing, the US Securities and Exchange Commission concluded that the German bank paid over $1 million in bribes and more in consults to boost its global operations. So therefore it was fined about 13 crore US dollars, Deutsche Bank. Moving further, very quickly we will discuss about how 11 UAE banks were imposed a penalty of 12 crore and 50 lakh US dollars. So they were imposed this penalty. Figures जो है इन सब के figures I will mention in the description. So all these cases that I'm trying to tell you, I have actually tried to compile all of them, and I'm just trying to discuss the brief points because it is more than enough for you to know the penalty amount, what were the mistakes that they made, and the name of the banks. That is what is expected you to know. So in this situation, there were 11 Saudi banks that were imposed this penalty, and they have poor money. They actually had a very poor money laundering and terrorist financing laws in their country. So therefore, they were fined this particular amount. ING Bank was also fined with 3,600 million US dollars. The ING had no comprehensive information on the taxpayers, payers and payees credit transfers that exceeded payment thresholds, which was determined by the regulator. So they actually did not have any. The ING had no comprehensive information on the payers and payees of credit transfers that exceeded payment thresholds. That was actually determined by the regulator, and therefore it fined this bank. Deutsche Bank के केस में भी कुछ similarities हुई थी. Deutsche Bank basically failed to comply with Financial Intelligence Act prohibiting money laundering and terrorist financing. तो टेरर फंडिंग का पिछले वाले में भी एंगल था, इस वाले में भी एंगल है, where Deutsche Bank failed to do that and bank was sanctioned for poor administrative controls. उसके एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव कंट्रोल को जो है वो इम्प्लीमेंटेशन, उनके जो एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन था उसका इतना अच्छा नहीं था. दैट्स व्हाई द बैंक वाज इम्पोज्ड अ फाइन. ऑल्सो इट फेल्ड टू रिपोर्ट इट्स कैश थ्रेशोल्ड्स. सो दैट वाज ऑल्सो अनदर प्रॉब्लम. इट फेल्ड टू रिपोर्ट इट्स कैश. जो कैश में पेमेंट्स आई थी वो कहीं तरह से वो फेल किया था सही तरह से उसको मॉनिटर करने में और सही तरह से उसको रिपोर्ट करने में. सो दैट वाज ऑल्सो वन मोर प्रॉब्लम. I think a few Deutsche Bank cases are there which I will mention in the description. Similar formats hai, and I've actually tried to compile 2 to 3 lines of these. So please make sure you go through that. एक थोड़ा सा different case है which is Capital One, in which violations of the Bank Secrecy Act happened, in which the cash checking group provided services to 90 to 150 check cashiers yet failed to report suspicious activity despite knowing of criminal charges against specific customers including an organized crime syndicate. तो उनको पता था इस crime syndicate के बारे में कुछ issues हैं, but they failed to check on that and report that, and also failed to file currency transaction reports for over 50,000 transactions totaling to more than 16 million US dollars. So they failed to file currency transaction reports for over 50,000 transactions which were almost worth 16 बिलियन US डॉलर्स डिस्पाइट द वार्निंग्स. एंड तीसरी चीज एक प्रॉब्लम इसमें ये भी हुई थी कि द रेगुलेटर्स व्हेन दे सॉ दीज ट्रांजैक्शंस दे हैड सेंट देम वार्निंग्स बट दे डिड नॉट एक्ट ऑन देयर वार्निंग्स. सो द थर्ड प्रॉब्लम वाज दैट दे डिड नॉट एक्ट ऑन द वार्निंग्स ऑफ द रेगुलेटर्स. इस पॉइंट को आप एक बार फास्ट फॉरवर्ड एक बार पॉज करके दोबारा से सुन लीजिए, आपको ये पॉइंट समझ आ जाएगा. सो बेसिकली इसमें से हमें एक चीज और पता लगती है कि वी शुड टेक द वार्निंग्स ऑफ द रेगुलेटर्स. अगर रेगुलेटर हमें वार्निंग दे रहा है तो then we should take them into consideration and act accordingly. Right? So, two more cases very quickly which I would like to cover is HSBC, in which the HSBC Bank of UK was fined $85 million by the British Financial Conduct Authority due to severe failures in 3 main parts of the bank's transaction monitoring system. 3 main parts में उसके जो failures थे transaction monitoring को लेके, उसकी वजह से उनको फाइन किया गया था, which are essential in applying AML processes for 8 years from March 2010 to 2018. So इस पीरियड के बीच में इन लोगों ने इस प्रोसेस को फेलियर किया था, इस वजह से they were fined. According to the FCA, HSBC was charged with running insufficient monitoring of money laundering and terrorist financing activities, as well as inadequate testing and controls over the correctness and integrity of the data collected in its monitoring system. तो डेटा कलेक्शन इस सब पे भी प्रॉब्लम्स थी, इस वजह से दिस काइंड ऑफ फेलियर This kind of failure in regulatory compliance means that all transactions within that time period, which might be in a value of billion pounds, were monitored erroneously and not monitored at all. तो जो ट्रांजैक्शन थे वर्थ बिलियन पाउंड्स वो या तो गलत तरीके से मॉनिटर किए गए थे या मॉनिटर ही नहीं किए गए थे. तो इन सब चीजों को लेके HSBC वाज फाइंड $85 मिलियन. एक आखिरी केस कर लेते हैं डॉइच बैंक का. $130 मिलियन का है ये, इन विच डॉइच बैंक जो है was fined this amount for violating Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. The US Security and Exchange Commission investigated the bank and detected the crimes of bribery and fraud while millions of dollars were funded by Deutsche Bank. It was also found out that the senior executive management of the bank was involved in the scheme willingly and they lay out a plot to distort payments for corrupting the consultants. तो senior management भी यहाँ पे involved थी. तो सीधा सीधा इस केस में हमें पता लगा है. तो टोटल फाइन ऑफ 130 मिलियन कंसिस्ट ऑफ क्रिमिनल पेनल्टीज, क्रिमिनल डिसऑर्गमेंट, कंपेंसेशन टू द विक्टिम्स ऑफ 43 मिलियन, फाइन टू बी पेड बाय यूएस सिक्योरिटी एंड एक्सचेंज कमीशन. ऑफ कोर्स जो विक्टिम्स को कंपेंसेशन है वो भी बैंक की तरफ से ही आएगा. तो इसलिए इस अमाउंट में वो जो कंपेंसेशन ऑफ 43 मिलियन दैट वाज पेड टू द विक्टिम्स वाज आल्सो टेकन फ्रॉम द. सो दैट वाज अ कंपाइलेशन ऑफ द रीसेंट case laws where penalties were imposed on financial institutions. So do have a look at the description where I've tried to summarize all these cases, and it is sufficient for you to have a look at that in order to understand the penalties that were imposed on financial institutions in the last 1 year. So with this we come an end to this session. In case if you like watching this, don't forget to hit the like button, and last but not least, don't forget to go through the description. And to continue watching and staying connected with the financial crime series, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Till then, stay safe and thank you so much for watching.